Hello. I like to jump sometimes into a project with both feet and not a lot of thinking. And sometimes that works really well, sometimes that does not work at all. And sometimes it lands somewhere in the middle of working really well and not working at all. And somewhere in the middle of working really well and not working at all is this teddy bear. So this teddy bear came from a desire to make something frivolous, really. I wanted to make something without any main purpose. The only purpose I have for making teddy bears is that I like to make teddy bears and I like to have them around. I don't have any children, and this would not be suitable for children for reasons which I'll get into shortly. So this is my hand-woven fabric that I have been moving around on a shelf for about 2 years. I can't remember when I wove it. It'd be about 2 years ago, maybe. There's a lot of threads on this bear. We're not going to pull them because she will come apart. Now, this fabric was supposed to be a wrap. When I wove it, I was weaving it to be a wrap. It was a little bit too short, too long to be a shawl, too wide to be a short scarf. It kind of was just sort of a nothing-y thing. So it's been sitting on the shelf while I've been thinking about what to do with it. And what I decided to do with it was sew it, cut and sew it. Now, when you cut your hand-woven fabric, you run the risk of, and I can show you an example here because her leg's not very well attached, you can see there that it is all fraying, because that's what happens when you cut hand-woven fabric, unless it's been felted or fulled. And this is cotton, so it didn't felt or full, so it didn't lock together. So I've just got these loose threads, and this should not be a problem, except I didn't catch the seam properly. I'm going to have to hand sew that at some point. Anyway, there's a few things you can do to stop that happening, and I didn't do any of them. So I told you I didn't think about it. One of the things you can do is iron on interfacing. Interfacing is used in sewing to give fabric a little bit more structure and stability, often used in button plackets, which is harder to say than you'd think, around pockets, in collars, in lining handbags, for example, or the brims of hats, just to give the fabric some structure and stability. You can get very thick interfacing that will line a bag for you. You can get very, very thin interfacing, which is what I have, which will give a little bit of support and a little bit of structure without making it sort of bulky or firm. And I could have used that. But the thing about interfacing, it would have stopped the fraying at the edges, and it would have been a lot easier to mark the pattern out as well. But it also makes the fabric a little bit firmer, and I wanted to make sure that I got the shape of the bear when I stuffed it. So I didn't want any backing on that fabric that would make those lines a little bit straight. Having said that, I have sewn a straight line on her right there. But that's user error. That's me just making a mistake. I could probably poke that in. She doesn't mind. The other thing you can do is, before you cut your pieces, you can run a line of stitching around the inside of where you're going to cut, so that it's inside the seam allowance. So when you're sewing, you have your cutting line, and then a little bit later, a little bit to the side of that is the line that you're actually going to sew, and that gives you a seam allowance so that the fabric overlaps and joins together properly. Unfortunately, the seam allowances on Honey are very small, and I didn't really have room to do that, so I didn't. What I did instead was cut the pieces as and when I needed them, rather than all in advance. So normally when I'm sewing, I cut everything out first, have it all there ready to go, turn on the sewing machine, and then work through the pieces as the instructions direct me to. So in this case, I was reading the instructions and then marking what I needed to do, marking those pattern pieces, cutting out just those pattern pieces and sewing just them together to minimise handling, because otherwise I would have been flicking through them on the table. It all would have gone horribly wrong. It did kind of go horribly wrong in a couple of ways. I've already shown you the leg situation in here, which I do need to hand sew. So the other problem with Honey, this bear is from the Funky Friends factory. It's the Honey Bear pattern, and I've put her snout on upside down. So I've done a little bit of hand sewing there just to get a bit more of a shape on her face, because this points up. This is supposed to be at the top, which would give a nice little nose about there and then down into the chin. And I put it on upside down, and I couldn't unpick it, because if I unpicked it, it all would have fallen apart. And I literally had the exact amount of fabric that I needed to cut these pattern pieces. I didn't have any, well, I had about that much extra. You're not helping, Honey. Come and sit on him. Come and sit on me for a minute, dear. So I had about that much left over once I'd cut all the pattern pieces. So as I said, this is Honey Bear from the Funky Friends factory. I will put a link in the description if you would like to have a look at the pattern. She's a little bit cuter when her snout's on the right way up. But it's a nice, easy sew when you're not I'm just checking because I think that's falling apart. It's a nice easy sew when you're not trying to stop your fabric from fraying to pieces. I'm glad, you know, I like her. She's fine. She's very cute. She's unique. She's a little, just cover her ears. She's a little bit rustic and a little bit lumpy and bumpy, but she's beautiful in her own way. So that is my frivolous using up of some woven fabric that I didn't know what to do with. And she will sit with my other bears that I've made. Her head is on crooked. It's too late to fix it now. And yeah, so she will sit with my other bears that I've made once I have maybe fixed her legs. Although she's not going to be handled particularly much. She's not going to be played with by children. She doesn't need to be particularly sturdy. So maybe if I just leave her quietly, yes. She's looking at me like a bear that would like to be left quietly. So that is what I've been up to this week. I've been wrangling fabric for a poorly thought out. Look, she's fraying at the arms as well. That was the problem, because you leave gaps. Because you need to turn the bear the right side out once you've sewn it. And then you need to put stuffing in it. So those gaps, this is where one of them was, just started to fall apart. She's slightly understuffed because I was just worried that everything was going to fall apart. But she's done, and she's very cute in her own way, in her own special way. So I'm pleased with her, and I will place her gently, very gently, with the other bears that I have made. And I was thinking I should make another one out of some other fabric that I've got, but I'm going to have a break from making bears. As cute as she is, and she is cute. I mean, I think I recovered the snout quite well. So I'm going to put Honey in the bag, and then I'm going to get out. This has been on the little loom for a long time. It didn't take long to do in the grand scheme of things once I actually sat down to do it. I just haven't got around to sitting around and doing it. It's not finished, haven't twisted the fringe. But this is the obnoxious scarf that was on the little loom for about a month, because I just simply wasn't doing it. It's the 80s arcade carpet yarn on a yellow warp. So it needs, its fringe is twisted and it needs wet finishing, but that is how it has come out. It is so obnoxious and I do love it. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when I wet finish it, because there will be a little bit of shrinkage in this yellow warp. This is Bendigo Woolen Mills. And there will be a little bit of bloom in the weft. Bloom is when the yarn expands and fills in the gaps. So you can maybe see, I don't know, I'm showing you things. I'm no good at showing you things. You can maybe see there's sort of gaps between the threads. So bloom fills those gaps up a little bit. I don't think they'll fully fill because this is a wool and acrylic mix, but we will see. So that's how that's looking. I will get the fringes twisted and then I will get it wet finished and I will show you next week. Now, I'm in the unusual situation at this point of not knowing what I'm doing next. Ordinarily, whatever I'm working on, I've got a bit of an idea of what's going to happen next, whether I'm going to warp up the loom with something, whether I'm going to sew something, and I genuinely don't know. My next thing is obviously finishing this with the fringes, and then after that, I don't know. There's a few things that I want to sew, but there's also a few things that I want to weave, and a few other things that I want to play with, so I don't know what I'm going to show you next week, if anything. Maybe I'll just have this done, and that'll be the whole video. Which would be a nice break for you, because it would be much less waffle. So I don't know what's coming next week. I don't know what I'm doing this evening other than finishing this off, and I don't know if my next project will be sewing or weaving or something else. So we'll find out together next week. I mean, I'll know in advance, but you know, it'll be a surprise for both of us. I'm going to stop now. That's enough waffle for today. You have a lovely rest of your week. I will see you soon. Take care of yourself, and bye for now.